Some opposition parties, though, are calling for the president to slash that cabinet by half and make some changes to the security cluster. Others want him to use this opportunity to announce his resignation.
Good evening, fellow South Africans.
All eyes will be on the president this evening. Some opposition parties say Ramaphosa should use the opportunity to sack those ministers who are implicated in wrongdoing in the Zondo Commission report. Others say he must shake up the security cluster.
We also expect President Ramaphosa to bring drastic changes in the security cluster. Minister of Police, Bheki Cele, and Minister of State Security Agency must be fired and replaced by competent people.
With 27 ministers in 28 portfolios, some parties believe the cabinet is too bloated and must be reduced.
If he does not utilize this opportunity to more than half his cabinet, he will not be acting in the best interest of South Africa, in the best interest of taxpayers, and in the best interest of a streamlined and effective government. He must also utilize the opportunity to get rid of ministers under whose care the departments fell into crises.
The instability of coalition governments in some municipalities is also a cause for concern for some of the parties.
We have huge challenges in spaces like local government, where the coalitions are largely unstable and where we really need a minister who can lead there to introduce rules and laws to stabilize coalition governments, because it's obvious that coalitions are part of our future. So I would say local government is an area or a portfolio where we need some new energy. Transport has had 6 ministers over the last 9 or 10 years, which has really led partly to the collapse of our transportation.
The ACDP wants certain ministers axed.
The allegations against Mr. Gordhan necessitate that he steps aside and steps down. We believe that Minister Nxesi has presided over employment and labor, where we have some of the highest unemployment rates in the world. Minister Nxesi needs to go. We also believe that Minister Nzimande, as well as Mocheka, the higher education and basic education ministers, have exceeded their shelf life.
The ATM, on the other hand, wants the president to use the occasion to step down.
It cannot be that South Africa allows a constitutional delinquent and a fiscal thief to reshuffle cabinet. At 7 o'clock tonight, Mr. Ramaphosa must simply tender his resignation and face the full wrath of the law.
Lula Mamatya, SABC News, Parliament.
Well, Dr. Ibrahim Harvey has written prolifically about the president's words versus his actions in truly delivering on that promise he made of a new dawn. Dr. Harvey, good evening to you and welcome. With the 2024 elections just months away, this cabinet change can also be seen through the lens of the ANC's survival agenda. How will this cabinet signal where the president stands on party versus country priorities?
Hi, thanks, Iman. Look, very complex issues that Ramaphosa faces, and what decision he takes, regarding your answer to your question about, the composition of the cabinet. Also, you have to bear in mind that the part of the reason why it's been very difficult for him, and you can see how he is delayed in announcing the cabinet, is that this is about a year before the 2024 election. So already you've got serious factional strife in the ANC. And a lot of that factions has to do with the composition of the NEC and the cabinet. So I think that he wouldn't want to make very big changes to the cabinet. And I'll tell you, regarding the size of the cabinet, he made a promise in 2018 to considerably diminish the size of the cabinet. And nothing has happened at all. The Ramaphosa in particular at this moment is very delicately balanced between the factions. And I don't think the media might be speculating that he's going to make dramatic announcement and changes in the composition. I don't think so. Obviously, Paul Mashatile will come in as deputy president, but there's one person who I think is going to have a ministerial post, Sikle Zekalala. He actually got the most votes for the NEC of the ANC. And I suspect very strongly that he's going to be one of the ministers in the new ministers in Ramaphosa's cabinet. But, you know, there are lots of other things. If you've listened to people who've been interviewed on SABC and the ENCA, did you hear what they had to say about this big, thing about tomorrow's, this evening's
Cabinet reshuffle announcement,
cabinet reshuffle. They hardly mention that they don't see it as very important. They talk about cost of living crisis and what is happening in their lives at the moment. There's not one single person that I see was interviewed, who actually addressed any serious interest in the composition of this cabinet resulting from the reshuffle. So I think, where ordinary people are sitting at this moment and what their thoughts and feelings are about this cabinet reshuffle and the media and what they're looking at is very different. And I think we have to take our cue from ordinary people because that captures the magnitude of this very worst crisis I think we've ever had in post-apartheid South Africa now. In fact, to my mind, the composition of this cabinet, to be honest with you, I don't think is the biggest matter at this moment. I think there are far more important issues right now. And those people who were interviewed spoke to those issues. Not to say that the cabinet reshuffle has got no significance. I think it has limited significance. And I think it's been blown out of proportion by the media as if it's this big thing. I don't think it's going to be any dramatic announcement.
Yeah.
One question, however, is whether two ministers in particular, Dlamini Zuma and Sisulu Lindiwe, whether they're going to make it, I doubt very much because they stood against Ramaphosa. They didn't want him to be re-elected in December. It would be very interesting to see what happens to the two of them in the reshuffle.
Yeah, and that's been spoken about as well, Dr. Ibrahim Harvey. Just when you reference Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, you're obviously talking and referring in part to, what happened in terms of the impeachment vote. Well, we'll know whether your predictions are right in about, I think, an hour and 47 minutes. You commented recently that the strands of a series of daunting challenges are explosively converging on Ramaphosa. He's presided over the worst crises on every conceivable front since 1994. We're discussing the cabinet, and you say a lot of, exaggerated interest on the cabinet composition. So talk about the president then. Is he still the man for this job?
No, to be honest with you, Iman, part of the problem, the dilemma that we face with Ramaphosa, and it's one of the most serious pitfalls of our politics. We're descending into, because we don't have feasible alternatives except for the DA, about the best of the worst. Ramaphosa, the biggest cloud and the biggest crisis in his life is still the Pala Pala thing. In fact, to be honest with you, in some respects, the Pala Pala scandal is worse than Nkandla. Ramaphosa, that is why I penned the piece in News 24 column devoted to this matter. Properly speaking, the entire cabinet, to be very frank with you, the crisis in the ANC cuts across the factions. Ideally, I wish we had a new ruling party, and I wish we had a party to the left of the SACP, COSATU, the so-called independent left. Unfortunately, they don't even have a single MP in parliament.
Yeah.
But ideally, honestly, I think we just, because we're so limited, seriously limited with political choices and alternatives to the ANC, that, we have to obviously, in fact, that's the reason why I critically still supported Ramaphosa for a second term in December. Because in relation to the other factions, Zuma, S. Magashule, and those people around those two people, I think really Ramaphosa would still be a better candidate for a second term than one of those two. And certainly he's made some big strides in the anti-corruption campaign that he came to office with. Brian left, other people being seen in court. Clearly you can see he's put his foot down. And I don't think we must lose sight of the gains. We're going to see what happened to the Zondo Commission of Inquiry recommendations, and it be a serious test this year as to whether he really moves towards implementation of those recommendations.
Well, for balance, and again, we're always working with the time that we have. I want you to touch on this, Dr. Harvey, which you also write about. How extraordinarily different are the challenges Ramaphosa faces as compared to his predecessors?
No, he faces far worse pressures, because you can't run away from the fact that his predecessors did not confront the COVID thing, had a devastating impact, and then the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So there's a set of complex dynamics that prevails during Ramaphosa's tenure, first term, which his predecessors did not face. And in fact, I think a critical analysis of him don't take sufficiently into account that there are objective circumstances beyond his control, which he had to contend with, in particular COVID and its devastating consequences, which his predecessors did not. So I think we need to temper a critical analysis of Ramaphosa and take that into account also,
Dr. Ibrahim Harvey, I wish we had more time, but we don't, and we thank you for yours. Political analyst, Dr.
Thanks,
Ibrahim Harvey.
Thank you.